Good evening. We're going to begin preparing for tonight's program. And tonight's forum will be broadcast live on local cable. And we'll go live promptly at 7:30, so it'll be important that everyone make it to their seats, please, before we begin.
God,
and at this point, I'd like to ask all of the candidates to please make their way to the stage.
You know, that's why I don't wear suit jackets.
Do you know that this together again?
Well,
This mic
this
is
is
voice
just by
activated.
accident. We did not plan this.
This mic is voice activated,
Yeah, I know.
so they'll hear you.
I know.
Don't give away your campaign.
And while the candidates are making their way to the stage,
I know.
Okay.
These are live.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rick White. I'm the president of the George Mason High School PTSA, and I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. Earlier this evening, the candidates met with sponsors of tonight's forum to determine the speaking order and the seating arrangement. And we will go over the rules in a few moments with the moderator. She'll explain the rules to all so that we're all clear.
How you doing?
You got it.
But before we get into the rules, I want to take a few moments just to acknowledge the students who are here this evening. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge Blaise Xavier, who's the president of the George Mason Student Government. Blaise,
Okay.
is in the back. Diana Kim is the communications chair with the student government. And Jack West. Jack, where are you? Jack's in the back here. Take a look at Jack. Jack is live tweeting this event tonight. And with that, everybody smile. Boom. Hashtag FCCPS debate if you want to follow. I'd like to acknowledge Superintendent Jones in the back. Thank you very much. And I also would like to thank Mr. Byrd and the George Mason administrative team. They do an exceptionally good job with our students and with this school.
Hear, hear.
I want to thank them very much. Current school board member, and I'd like to say my school board member, Michael Ankuma, is here somewhere. Michael, thank you very much for coming. A special note to Mr. Ballou and his team. The auditorium looks great. The staging looks great. Thank you very much for your work today. And last and certainly not least, I want to thank the teachers of George Mason High School. You do an incredible job helping to prepare our children for the future, and I want to thank you. So for tonight's host, I want to provide a special recognition to the Falls Church City Elementary PTA, who's represented tonight by President-elect Elizabeth Mead. Thank you very much. They played an important role helping to guide this entire process, and thank you very much, Elizabeth. Co-sponsoring tonight's events will be with George Mason PTSA is the Village Preservation and Improvement Society, represented by Tim Stevens. You'll hear an awful lot about that organization in just a few moments whenever Ellen comes up. Ellen is with the League of Women Voters of Falls Church. And with that, Ellen, if you have a few comments for us.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Welcome to the 2015 School Board Candidates Forum. I'm president of the Falls Church League of Women Voters, and we are a nonpartisan organization, and I stress nonpartisan, dedicated to encouraging informed citizen participation in government. Our league was created in 1951, so we've been working for 64 years here to create a better community. We're very pleased tonight to co-sponsor this forum with the Falls Church Village Preservation and Improvement Society, and they've been here even longer than we have. They were founded in 1885. But also along with VPIS, we're very pleased to be working with the George Mason PTSA and working with the input that we got from the Falls Church Elementary PTA. They've been very valuable participants in tonight's event. As I said, VPIS has been around since 1885. VPIS promotes and supports the city's natural and community environment, its historic structures and landmarks, as well as the cultural activities that sustain the excellent quality of life that we associate with Falls Church. Neither the League nor VPIS ever endorse political candidates. and all of the organizations involved tonight believe that this forum is a very important part of community service. In an effort to continue the League's mission of community service, we would like to invite you to a program which we're sponsoring at the Community Center Sunday, the 18th at 3 p.m. It's called Where Does Your Tax Dollar Go? You might all be interested in that. Working as timekeepers tonight are Ruth Rogers and Sally Phillips, and now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening, Joan Wadiska. Mrs. Wadiska has a very strong background as an expert in education policy, education politics, leadership, and governance. Presently, she is Vice President of the Virginia Board of Education, which sets and leads policy for Virginia's 1.2 million students and over 50,000 teachers and school leaders. Here in Falls Church, Mrs. Wadiska has deep ties and an understanding of our city schools. She's the former chairman of the Falls Church School Board, where she served with distinction for almost a decade. She was also president of the Virginia School Boards Association, which provides leadership and training to all of Virginia's school board members. Most importantly, as she would tell you, she's the mother of 2 Falls Church school-aged children and is the proud product of public schools and the daughter of 2 public educators. So tonight we're very pleased to welcome Mrs. Wadiska as the moderator for this important forum. So let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that gracious invitation. Well, good evening, Falls Church City. Welcome. This is a historic election for our community, an election that will decide the future of the public schools. Before you this evening are 8 candidates vying for 3 school board seats. Never before in the city has there been such competition for the school board. As voters, you have an important decision to make. Before we begin, let me briefly explain the format and rules for the 2015 School Board Forum. The candidates are seated by random lot drawn earlier this evening. Candidates will be making a 90-second opening statement. Next, we'll proceed to the soon-to-be infamous question bank, whereby candidates will field randomly selected questions from 6 distinct categories: academics, staffing, budget, construction, school culture, and governance. The question bank was developed based on public input from the League of Women Voters, the PTA, and VPAS. Questions reflect the array of challenges and opportunities in our schools, as well as the real day-to-day hard work, choices, and demands of school board service. Candidate responses will be limited to 1 minute, and questions will rotate along the row. At 8:45, no matter where we are, the question bank will close, and candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Statements may include a rebuttal or a response to a question asked earlier. All statements and responses will be timed, and candidates will be alerted by our official timekeepers. They will see a yellow paddle when they have 15 seconds remaining, and they will see a red paddle when it's time to stop talking, and that will be strictly enforced. The candidates have agreed to all of these rules. Is that not correct? Yes. So, a few additional housekeeping items for our live audience here in the GM. Electronics, tweet, Twitter. Join us on Facebook and communicate with all your friends and fellow voters about this forum. In fact, you can join us thanks to Jack West, our student reporter from LASSO, at hashtag FCCPSdebate. So, join the conversation. However, silence your phones. So please take a moment, check your phone, pull it out. I know you want to look, and make sure that it is put on Do Not Disturb or silence for our viewing audience at home. Photos. Take photos. Snap a selfie. but no flash photography, and no images of this forum can be used in campaign material. And lastly, a word on PDS, public displays of support. Out of respect to all, please refrain from any PDS or PDO, public displays of opposition, clapping, or any other form of distraction. Okay, enough with the rules. Candidates, are you ready?
Ready? Yes.
Let's begin. Ms. Kuchma, please begin.
Hi, I'm Allison Kuchma. I've lived here for 13 years, and I have 3 George Mason High School graduates. I want to listen to our educators to create what they want for our schools. I want communications with integrity. That's honest, complete communications the first time. No partial truths or spin or misleading information, and please, no bullying. Construction accountability. Our district is about to embark on the largest construction project in its history, yet we have seated at the table the same management team that led us down the road to Mount Daniel. I think it's wrong, and I would make a change. I'm gravely concerned about our budget process. We need spending information tied to educational outcomes. We need to be adding up all our non-educational spending. I went to the budget work sections, and they discussed neither of those, and they voted on a handout. At a school board meeting this past Tuesday, we saw another slide about how our great SAT scores are. And that's really wonderful, don't get me wrong. But what's interesting, and I'll share something with you that I learned. Did you know that only 20% of our student body take SAT scores? When I'm on the school board, I would like to see a slide for the other 80% of the students that go to our schools. Let's focus on educational outcomes for each and every child.
Mr. Kay.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here tonight. I got to say, we have a great city and a great school system, but we're going to face a lot of challenges going forward. We cannot rest on our laurels. We've had a lot of fiascos. We've had the Mount Daniel debacle, overruns at Thackeray, the costly delays at TJ. The Apple Watch, that's just a symbol, maybe tip of an iceberg of a lot of other things. It just shows that there's no board supervision of the executive management of the school system. Now we're proposing on one of these secretive private-public partnerships for a multi-million-dollar development of the Mason campus. This is the same group that's had running these other construction projects. I don't know if we have what it takes. We also have to realize that if we're going to get a free high school out of this, what, $100 million to build this high school, a middle school, it's a lot of money. The developer's going to demand a lot. It's going to be turning this place into Tyson's 3 with many high-rise apartments. Let's be very clear about it. The developer will want tax abatements and a lot of density. We have to keep that in mind as we move forward. I'm also concerned about academics. I'm concerned about the SOL scores at TJ and SOLs at TJ and Mary Ellen Henderson. We need to put more resources on kids, and we need new leadership for our school board to take us into the future. I appreciate your vote, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Radcliffe.
Good evening. I'm Jake Radcliffe. I have a kindergartner and a second grader. We moved here for the outstanding schools, and I'm running because I'd like to volunteer to improve them even more. This election is about leadership, and I think I have leadership skills and ability that this particular board actually needs. The question of Mount Daniel is embarrassing for all of us, but when you ask why that happened, it's because somebody trusted an advisor too much. I have been working with consultants and experts on both, and I've been the consultant and expert for over a decade. I know how to manage these relationships, and I know how to optimize them to get better results. In a similar way, I intend to dig down on the budget line items beneath what you can already see online to try to find new efficiencies and not adhere too quickly to the way we've always done things. But the most important thing I intend to do as a school board member is listen. Listen to the ideas of our faculty and our administration for ways that we can improve, and also listen to the families who go here and whose children go to school here, and tell us about their problems, the struggles their kids are having, and ways they want us to improve them. Thank you for considering me as your candidate. It's an honor.
Mr. Reitinger.
Good evening. My name is Phil Reininger, and I'm a candidate for school board. I'd like to start by thanking the sponsors of this event and all of you for attending. I've lived in Falls Church City since 1998. I lived here before my kids went to the school system, and my wife and I intend to live here well after they graduate from George Mason in about 7 years. A few years ago, we were looking for a new house, a larger house, and we only looked in Falls Church City because this is where we wanted to be. We love the people, we love the community, we love the schools. So we stayed here. I think I've got the right experience and background to be a good school board member and to partner with the other members of the school board. I have triplets in 7th grade. They've come up the whole way through the school system, so I know it pretty well, and I'm looking forward to them going to George Mason in a year or two. I'm an experienced executive in both government and industry, and I know about managing large organizations because I've done that myself. Now, I'm concerned with a lot of issues. I'm interested in a lot of issues like teacher retention and the use of technology, but in the 30 or so seconds I've got remaining to me, I thought I'd do something a little different and tell you a story. I was driving one of my sons to Mary Ellen Henderson this morning because he's on the studio crew that does the morning announcements. And he said to me from the back seat, "Dad, why don't you make one of your platform objectives improving the cafeteria food?" I tell you that not because the food needs improvement, I'm sure it's quite good, but because each of you wants something different in a candidate. But we all want good schools. And I want your trust and your vote so that I can help make the schools better. Thank you.
Mr. Castillo.
Thank you. I'm Justin Castillo, currently chair of the school board and running for a re-election. And I would just like to say the last time a Castillo was up here was when my son George was playing Phantom of the Opera, so eat your heart out, George. I've lived here for 21 years. My wife and I moved here. We've raised 4 kids here, 3 of whom have gone through the school system from Mount Daniel on. We had one daughter who went to private school for several years. And actually, it was surprising to me on reading some of the technology that was used at Mount Daniel. I was surprised to see that the old school approach of her private school versus what my younger kids got at Mount Daniel, the Waterford worked really well. So that was my first insight into just how good Falls Church Public Schools are. For us, Falls Church is more than just another DC suburb. It's a way of life. It's an engaging place where we're inside the Beltway, and yet we live in a world that kind of has the best of both worlds with respect to small towns and good location in a large metropolitan area. And I think the commitment that we have to this jurisdiction shows in our schools. We have great results. We had 100% of last year's seniors graduate. The cohort of students who entered George Mason in 9th grade, 98.4% graduated 4 years later. I think there are a lot of challenges. I think the most serious criticism you can make of the schools is they're not perfect, but we're working on it. And we'll continue to work on it, and with your support, I can do that. So thank you.
Dr. Smearden.
Good evening. My name is Becky Smearden, and I have 2 7th graders at MEH. I have a PhD in education from the University of Michigan, and I've spent 20 years in the field of education research and policy. My current portfolio of work focuses primarily on supporting states, districts, and schools as they use data to improve system and student outcomes. I currently work with state education agencies and school districts in Virginia, D.C., Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. I moved here so my children could have the best educational experiences I could provide for them, and I have not been disappointed. I'm running for school board because I'm committed to ensuring that all children in our schools receive the best possible education that our city can provide. I have 3 key priorities as a school board member: increase college and career readiness and success for all students, support educator effectiveness, develop long-term solutions for enrollment and budget increases. Research has identified 5 characteristics of effective school boards. They are: focus on student achievement, allocate resources to needs, watch return on investment, use data, engage the communities they serve. As a school board member, I will embody these characteristics and apply my strong education knowledge and experience and commitment to our community to focus on continuous improvement. Thank you.
Mr. Sharp.
My name's Kieran Sharp. Welcome to Spirit Week at George Mason High School. The spirit of this gathering focuses on our school's future, not this week's homecoming events. On Saturday this week, on Tuesday, November the 3rd, you will say how you want to achieve your education objectives. In recent years, Power flowed too much to administrators and outside experts. Your spirit now shows a desire to shift the balance of power to greater citizen control. Thank you. Tonight typifies the spirit of 1948, maybe even 1788. We have 8 candidates for just 3 seats. Perhaps not since 1948, Falls Church has shown so much spirit for popular control in its schools. In 1948, citizens, particularly school parents like Jesse and Franklin Thackeray, were dissatisfied with the quality of education their children could get from Fairfax County. The county at large was still agrarian while Falls Church had become suburban. With no charter school movement by which to obtain smaller classes or higher pay for teachers in 1948, Falls Church chartered a city to achieve those education objectives. And by the early 1950s, the city had built a state-of-the-art high school. You might not believe that now, but in 1950 it was. Naming it in honor of the father of the Bill of Rights. We then continued to lead, first in Virginia, with racial integration, all-day kindergarten, daycare for all working parents, an IB program, and soon IB K through 12.
Ms. Gill.
Good evening, I'm Erin Gill. I've lived in the city for about 3.5 years, and I have 3 boys, aged 1, 3, and 6. You'll hear a lot of numbers thrown around tonight around the cost of various projects, the rising school budget, enrollment, where our kids live, where our kids might live. We can debate and attempt to predict how many kids will come from mixed-use developments, but we would need to rebuild, renovate, and expand 4 of our 5 schools even if we saw 0 enrollment growth. George Mason is out of date and over capacity and has been for years. Our enrollment is growing, but at a much slower rate than we'd predicted. Total enrollment grew by 2.3% last year, well below the predicted 3.94%. I don't believe that qualifies as explosive growth. We do not need to fear that our schools will become supersized or that the land we are sitting on will become Tyson's 3. On that topic, we do not need to fear the public-private partnership process. Strong leadership and robust advisory team is vital, and we have a team in place to review the incoming proposals. I have a background in contract law and leverage finance, and am confident in my ability to read and understand the proposals, and more importantly, ask the right questions. Finally, we are all one community, and whether you have kids in the school or not, we are all in this together. Our city and this community were founded around our schools, and we have great schools, but the excellence of our schools and the future of our city is not written in stone. We must continue to work together to ensure that our future is as bright as our past.
Thank you. Thank you all, candidates. With the conclusion of the opening statements, let's move to the question bank. The first question will be asked of Ms. Kuchma. Your first question is, what is your reaction to the range of salaries from superintendent to principals to paraprofessionals?
Honestly, I was concerned to see the range. There's been a lot of discussion in the community about the high, what is perceived by the community to be the high pay of some of our, the upper administrators. It is disconcerting to people in the community, but I think there has to be an understanding that to recruit good staff, you need to have good salaries. I think that there needs to be more transparency in those. The superintendent received $25,000 in tax-free dollars at the end of her this year, and that's just not something that's discussed and transferred to the community. So I think as part of that, there needs to be transparency in what we pay our top administrators.
Mr. Kay. What are your views on the current amount of school testing, and how would you reduce test anxiety?
If you're referring to the standardized tests, they're there. They're federal and state regulations and laws. I'm not in favor of them. My son went through the system. He's a 2014 graduate of George Mason High School. They do take a lot of time, and I think they maybe distract from some of the core things that the students need to focus on. Tests, in general, I think they're a good thing. You have to measure. I mean, no one likes to take tests. I don't particularly like taking tests, but you need metrics. You need to be able to see how kids are performing so they can get if they need support, they can get it. If they're excelling, then give them additional resources so they can do even more. Thank you.
Mr. Radcliffe. If you had to decrease school spending by $330,000, what would you do?
In general, I would see if there was an efficiency I can identify that somebody hadn't been able to find before. There may be ways to share with the city. There may be ways to have people take on additional tasks to try to solve a problem like that. There may also be a way that we can reach out to the community to make up the shortfall. That's one of the great things about Falls Church is the tremendous amount of parent and community involvement that comes into the schools every day. So in general, I'm not going to sit up here and say that I would cut a particular program because I haven't identified anything I want to take away.
Mr. Reitinger, how would you expand student access to the Arlington Career and Technical Center?
I'm not sure it's possible to expand the student access to the Arlington Technical Center because it's a center that's being, to my understanding, increasingly filled up by Arlington students. If there are ways to enter into a contract to give us priority or equal footing with Arlington, I think that would be a very good thing to do. In the alternative, I think we need to continue to look at other mechanisms to provide those same sorts of opportunities to students who might not be able to attend the Arlington program, including internships in businesses and or taking community college programs that are focused on more career-focused elements as opposed to further higher education.
Mr. Castillo, how would you encourage minority parental involvement in the schools?
Well, I think there are several ways that you can do that. One of the things that we've been working on doing is, and I'll be quite honest, there was a little bit of a lapse in some of the direction that we gave to our advisory committees, and we had historically provided training to the various advisory committees and sort of given a preview going forward into the year every August to our advisory committees and said, here are some things we'd like you to work on. We've made an effort to go back to that and really revisit the advisory committees and find a way to empower them and energize them. And I think the advisory committees are a great tool for doing that. There's a lot of outreach that we can do through the various communications media that we have. So I think it's developing a mechanism to use the many resources we have in terms of parent volunteers and reach out incrementally to people to bring them in. Thank you.
Dr. Smearden, what are your views on the current school board policy on class size?
Great question. Research shows that you sort of have some diminishing returns. So typically between 12 and 15 students is sort of an optimal size. Beyond that, you sort of begin to lose the benefits of having a small class. Having said that, having children in classrooms and knowing many teachers, a smaller class size allows you to know students better and to better understand them. However, we don't have a consistent class size across all of our classes. For example, there is at least one IB class in the high school that has 8 students in it. So I think we need to look at what the class sizes look like and which kids get into smaller classes.
Mr. Sharp, what additional policies would you make to address bullying, including cyberbullying?
Well, we've begun this year with a health and wellness committee that I think would need to look at that development of policy. In previous years, we did have a health committee. We also had what's called the Alliance for Youth, which is an interagency group that works across the city government and the schools. And they too can provide some very good expertise in that regard. We also have, in our past, some programs that were begun with grant resources from the news press and elsewhere to bring outside experts on bullying into our schools. All of our policies should encourage our students to be forgiving of their colleagues. We also have a Best Buddies program that I was able to witness some of the people who implement that when I took a tour with Mustang ambassadors.
Ms. Gill, What are your views on the relative priorities for investing scarce city resources in the schools?
That's a great question. I think that we should invest in things that we need and not things that we want. And I think that everyone can look at the most recent example of the Apple Watches as something that maybe we wanted, and not something that we needed. We do have scarce resources, and I think the community starts to feel like maybe we're not spending our money effectively, or maybe we have more money that we know what to do with if we're spending it on a lot of nice-to-haves and not a lot of need-to-haves. When our teachers don't have enough money for school supplies, it's difficult for me to look at some of the expenditures we're making on consultants and other lawyers and other advisory boards. So I would, can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I'm losing it a little bit. I want to make sure I return to it.
What are your views on the relative priorities for investing?
Relative priorities. Well, the number one priority should always be our students and educating our students and our teachers. So I wanted to circle back to that and make sure I made that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Round one is complete. Ms. Kuchma.
Yes.
Would you allow school staff to carry weapons on school grounds?
You know, I mean, my reaction is no. That's a complicated question. I mean, I would have to have a lot of information. I mean, my reaction, of course, is no. But when you hear school shootings and if a student had a license to carry and they had a weapon, the outcome would be different. And there are teachers, I don't know any in this building, but there are teachers who carry concealed weapons because they don't feel safe in their school. So I would be open to listening to both sides of that, whatever the community makes the community feel safe. But my first reaction is no. I mean, that makes me uncomfortable, but the world is changing, and we'd need to look at all the information.
Mr. Kay, in your view, is there adequate school crisis planning and training?
To be very blunt with you, I can't say I'm expert in this area, but in view of the situations we've encountered across the United States, gun violence and things that we can't even anticipate now, natural crisis, it's something that we definitely need to spend time on. I would definitely work on making sure the staff has a plan of action, first of all. If anything happens that in various scenarios, to make sure they can react to it. We have a lot of smart people in town here that could probably provide resources so you don't have to hire expensive consultants or lawyers to brief you. We have our police department, so I think we have resources here just to make it happen in itself. And also communicate. Let the students know, that there are plans in place, maybe involve the students in these planning efforts. They're the people most impacted, so I'm always big on keeping the kids involved. They're very smart, they're very in tune, so that's what I would do. Thank you.
Mr. Radcliffe, since 2004, the Falls Church Education Foundation has given over $1 million to the schools. How would you support and promote the foundation, and how have you been involved?
I've lived here, it'll be 2 years in January, and I've been to 2 of the the Education Foundation events. I would continue to shout thank you from the rooftops for everything that they do, and to continue to work with them. If I'm on the board, they'll be just down the hall. My involvement to date has not been with the Education Foundation. I've been involved in managing Little League teams and being on the board of the Little League. I've been involved in volunteering directly in the schools. And I actually think they run a really good organization that probably doesn't need my help. I'm trying to slot in here because I think I have the skills that will help us move forward. Since I have a few minutes, I would like to let everyone know that we do have a crisis and emergency plan in place. It's available. I actually asked for a copy of it when another parent asked me. It is in place. If you'd like to review it, I'm sure the board would appreciate feedback. And I do not want anyone to carry in school.
Mr. Reitinger, what are your views on the need for overall policies and goals for environmental sustainability for our school system, including buildings, grounds, and educational programs?
Well, I think the needs are very high. We as a city have very stringent rules on what we expect from developers who build in the city. I think it's somewhat incumbent on us to consider enforcing those same rules to make the environments just as healthy for our kids. And that we have places, including schools with green spaces, that people in the city can go to. Now, one question that frequently comes up is, should you seek LEED certification as opposed to just meeting LEED requirements? And I have to say my mind is open on that. I just am not familiar enough with what the actual costs would be to get the certification as opposed to meeting all of the LEED requirements. And there's a value in getting a certification because what it does is it gives you an enforcement mechanism that helps you to continue to meet the standards. And I think that's a valuable, monitoring function to have. But it's a cost-benefit analysis to some extent.
Mr. Castillo, how should the school board address the growing drug and alcohol problem?
That's an excellent question, and I think that's difficult because I think it reflects a sea change to some extent in our culture. And I have no doubt that we have debates at our house about legalization of marijuana, and I'm from Colorado, but that wasn't my idea. And I think the first thing I say is with respect to smoking weed, as it's now called, I tell my kids, I wouldn't smoke cigarettes. They're legal, so why in the world would you smoke marijuana or anything else? And I think what we have to do is fight what's really a pretty strong cultural orientation saying that this is now permissible. I know colleges that my friends' kids are going to now, there's smoke in the halls at night. And so I think we really have to sort of remind kids that what's culturally permissible and what makes sound health choices are not the same.
Dr. Smerdon, what criteria should the school board use to evaluate the superintendent?
Great question. Actually, the Virginia Department of Education provides guidelines and a lot of information on their recommendations about how to do this. I think there are a number of criteria. First and foremost, we should have board goals that we measure and hold our leadership, both the board as well as the superintendent, to. I believe, and this is in accordance with Virginia Department of Education recommendations, we have a community survey relating to the superintendent because community engagement is a critical piece of her job. And I would also want information from our educators to really get feedback from them as well.
Mr. Sharp, how would you ensure productive relationships between city council and other public bodies between the school board?
Well, we do have a leadership, what used to be called Gang of Eight, and it expanded into some additional number. And I think that was fairly effective. It needed to meet quite often to be very effective. We also had a steering committee for the development of a plan for going forward with building high school and expanding the middle school. I think that also had very sound effect, and I think many of us see the results now in an RFP for GM and MEH. There's also relationships with other city bodies, including the Environmental Services Council, the EDA, the Human Services Advisory Council. All of those we should be monitoring regularly, at least monitoring, if not having a regular liaison to those groups. Thank you.
Ms. Gill, how would you ensure equitable access to extracurricular activities for all students? And are there additional extracurricular activities that you would like to propose?
Well, I think that all of the extracurriculars should be open to all students. I don't know how you ensure that everyone wants to participate in all of them, but they should be open to all the students. And if there are barriers to involvement because some of the materials are only put out in English and there are students who aren't speaking English and they feel like they can't participate, we should make sure we're translating those documents so that they can participate. Make sure those documents are going home to their parents so their parents know what activities are available to their children so that they can help their children participate in the activities. Similarly, if we have kids with special needs who want to participate, we should work to accommodate them so they can participate in all of the activities. Other activities I'd like to see, I know some people have mentioned an orchestra. As we look at our growing enrollment, that's a great opportunity. It's something we could add that we can't accommodate if we have a small school district. There are other programs like that, sports that we could begin to add if our school enrollment is growing.
That completes round 2. We'll now begin round 3. Ms. Kuchma, how can the school board foster a creative and flexible work environment for teachers to be more creative with both the curriculum and with the classroom?
Well, I think it's very challenging with standardized tests. I think it's with the SOLs, it's very difficult for teachers to have the opportunities to be creative. So I really applaud them when they can be. I think what would be helpful to figure out a way to incorporate more feedback from the teachers. I feel that the current school board kind of sits in separation, and there's a lot that goes on where there isn't an opportunity for input from our educators. And there was a survey that was done during the budget process, and I felt the questions were leading, and I just think there could be more of an open communication, and that might facilitate some creativity.
Mr. Kay, how do you make teacher and administrator salaries more competitive with other divisions?
Well, that question assumes that they are not competitive with other areas. Obviously you need to do a statistical analysis just to ascertain what the ground truth is. But you have to take into account, and I've said this earlier, that you've got to look at the context of Falls Church City, the environment you're teaching in our schools. I would say it's a nice place to teach. There's a lot of positive things here. When you look at other areas across the country, there are many more challenges for teachers. You have very diverse populations, special needs, and you should compensate people more for that type of work. But I do believe that Falls Church City teachers need to be competitively paid, especially in comparison to surrounding jurisdictions, but we need to look at the whole compensation picture, the workplace environment, and quality of life. Thank you.
Mr. Radcliffe, what strategies would you support to improve special education?
I think that we just need to continue to reach out to the families directly and respond to their needs. Special education involves working with a variety of very, very different situations, and so it really is a one-to-one kind of relationship, I think, between the school and the student. There are so many different needs that so many of our kids have that to set forth a policy that isn't really one-to-one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think we also have to look at this as a small community. The special needs children, a lot of families with kids with special needs come to Falls Church, which is a wonderful thing, and it says a lot about how good of a job we're doing. But we don't need a massive policy to deal with families we can readily identify, reach out to, and try to serve as best as possible.
Mr. Reitner, what are your views on gifted and talented education? And please comment on all grades.
Well, it's interesting. I went through a gifted and talented program. Sorry, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I was in a gifted and talented program. In Jacksonville, Florida, that didn't actually mean all that much. I could add and read and things like that. But it's gifted and talented it's part of the spectrum of needing to meet everybody's needs, right? And some kids have special needs that they need to have addressed so that they can effectively learn. There are a lot of kids in the middle, people like to call them, that still have things, and they've got individual things. Kids Just because a kid is a kid in the middle doesn't mean they're all the same. They've got unique things they want to do. And the gifted and talented kids have to have the flexibility to go as far as they can, to be challenged to the greatest extent possible, whether that's doing something special in school or going to a remote university class. So I think the overall approach of the school system of personalized learning is the right approach, because the idea is meet each kid where that kid is and give them what they need.
Mr. Castillo, how would you maintain or expand sport and activity fields here in the city?
You're talking about the physical fields?
Physical space.
Well, I think there are a few opportunities that are going to be coming up, and we'll see what they yield with respect to the layout of fields that we have now is not optimal. For example, the baseball field really should be rotated 180 degrees. I think you'll see a move towards making as much as possible out of the assets that we have so that they can be used for recreation for the whole city as well as for the use of the students. So I think having dual use approaches is one way. I think being more opportunistic about how we move kids around and use various spaces. For example, the MEH gym is a good example of, it has high school uses as well as the use by the kids there. So I think it's part and parcel of our doing more with less or doing more with the same amount. So I think the intensity of use at places, for example, the turf field is very well managed. I think we can continue to make maximum use of that. There's a reality, they're not making any more land in Falls Church. So.
Thank you. Dr. Smirden. The PTA is a critical partner with the school board staff and community. How would you support and promote PTA membership, and are you yourself a member?
A great question. The deadline is coming up, so I am actually meeting that deadline, barely. And so we have worked with, the Special Education Advisory Committee has worked with the PTA to try to create a relationship among our committee as well as the PTA. And the idea is to sort of bring together and really address the needs of all kids at each of the schools. And so one of the activities that we've taken on is to have a liaison to each of the PTAs. And so we, as a school board member, I would very much sort of both rely on PTAs as a conduit of information, one of many, as well as sort of work with them to help think about how to raise additional resources that I think we need. As a small story, I have a friend. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the stop.
Mr. Sharp, ESOL students approximately make up 7% of our school population. What strategies would you support to ensure equitable access and academic achievement?
I think we've done some very good things in trying to serve our ESOL population. The methods that we've used in the summertime, particularly to provide food for our families, including food on the weekends. Just tout Miss Wodiska's program in Food for Thought. She began at the state level, but carried it basically from here, expanded it statewide. And I think there's also, as my colleague Ms. Gill mentioned, a need for translations for many of our documents, many of our PTA materials, our advisory committee materials. And we should be taking advantage of the kinds of resources that are available in many institutions in our area, including healthcare institutions, where they have language lines that they can use to assist with those people. It's not, we don't have to have the entire staff be able to speak 15 languages.
Ms. Gill, what's your opinion of the new start times, and is the current busing system the most cost-effective and safest?
So I have a 3-year-old who goes to Jesse Thackeray, and he gets on the bus at 7:20 a.m. every day. I have to wake him up at 7 o'clock and rush him out of bed, throw him on the bus every day. So I would like to see that start time. I can really speak to the preschool and elementary level, I would like to see that start time pushed back. And I think a lot of parents, even with older kids, would like to see a little bit of a later start time for kids that's pretty early, although I know it's already got a little bit later. My understanding, though, is that we don't necessarily have enough buses to do that. So when my bus driver takes Henry to school, she immediately turns around and goes and gets the Mount Daniel kids. And I put my 6-year-old on the Mount Daniel bus, and he heads off to school. So maybe if we had just a couple more buses, it would be great. We can maybe have those youngest kids not going to school quite so early in the morning. Thanks.
That completes round 3. We'll now begin with round 4. Ms. Kuchma, should high-stake testing be used for teacher evaluations?
I'm sorry, high what?
Should high-stakes testing be used for teacher evaluations?
Well, I understand this. The state has made some changes in the way that teachers are evaluated, and I'm kind of concerned for the teachers because there's a lot of things that they have to go through for their evaluation. I understand the forms are very long, and teachers are under a tremendous amount of pressure. And I say that because I had 3 students with IEPs, and that, I spent a lot of time talking to staff, and there's just a lot going on from the other side of the table that just parents don't really know about. And they have their own evaluations with Mr. Bird here in this building. And so I would be concerned about adding more pressure to our educators.
Mr. Kay, what additional or alternative ideas do you have to finance school construction projects?
Well, I think one of the first things we need to do is, take into account the seriousness of this public-private partnership. There is no citizen access to the details, the financial details. So just remember that background. But first of all, we have to know the actual requirements. I think we need to do a macro overview of all our school buildings. What do we need strategically for the long run? Get that out of the way first. Have that done by the independent group so we have objective advice. If we want to do some type of deal with this very valuable land that we sit upon, first I want to know what is the value of this land in the marketplace? How much does it cost to build a new school? All independent cost estimates. That's actually my background. I worked for a think tank that does work like that. I'm not soliciting business here, by the way. But we need to get back to the basics. What are our requirements? How much do these things cost before we start entering negotiations with some developer? We can get that independently so we have the cards in our own hands to know where we stand in terms of negotiations.
Mr. Radcliffe, if you had an increase of $330,000 by random draw, what would you do with it?
If I had an increase of $330,000, I would go to the wish list of things that the school board wasn't able to satisfy last year in the compromise in the budget process, and then work with the rest of the school board and the superintendent to determine the best use of the money. Personally, I would always like to, if it was an annual budget that was going to repeat, I would want to get more teachers in the schools. I would also personally like to see a big change in college counseling. It works, it seems to me, aside from Naviance, almost exactly the same way as it did in 1990 when I graduated from high school, in the sense that kids don't really understand what they should be thinking about in terms of their own future, aren't individually guided in 9th and 10th grade, and then the scramble happens in junior, senior year. So those are some of my ideas, but I do that collectively with the other members of the board and the superintendent.
Mr. Reitinger, what has been your relationship to date and involvement in the Falls Church City Schools?
Well, my relationship to date has been primarily that of an active parent. As I said at the start, I have 3 kids that started off in Mount Daniel and went up until they're all in 7th grade right now. I volunteered the whole way through. I've also been involved in coaching Odyssey of the Mind for a number of years, so I coach my kids' team and a bunch of other kids are on the team, so that gives me some coaching experience, although not the type that many people have. The last thing is I've started to get very involved with the school IT and IT security staff to help them address some issues. So I've sat down with them on a couple of occasions in a very cooperative way to help them figure out some ways to get things done in a more effective way. Because in general, I think that if you can be helpful, you should be helpful. And I happen to have a reasonable amount of experience in that area. So that's what I've done.
Mr. Castillo, how would you use data to promote better educational success for all students?
Well, I think we're doing a pretty good job of that now. I think the use of star math and star reading, for example, allows a dynamic way of looking at each kid's ability to progress through a test, and the star math and star reading will adjust themselves so you get a really focused view of what the weak spots are and how to address that. The WIDA test, for example, also for non-native English speakers is also helpful. One of the things about data, somebody once said that a lot of things that are important can't be measured, and a lot of things that can be measured aren't important. My ninth grader came back the other day and said she really wished tests would teach her, would evaluate her as a student, not as a test taker. And I think we always have to remember data, it doesn't exist for its own sake. It exists to inform and guide you. But, I did a study abroad program in the Soviet Union one summer, and at the end of our summer...
Dr. Smerdon.
I'll tell you after.
Should the current proposal for Mount Daniel not go through, what creative alternatives would you propose?
Honestly, I don't have a plan B for Mount Daniel. I have been looking to our leadership that has brought us to the point where we are with Mount Daniel and seeking a plan B from them. I would like to understand how we got to where we are, to help us figure out how to move forward. But quite honestly, I have not come up with a creative plan myself, though would be very interested and involved, hopefully, in doing that with colleagues.
Mr. Sharp, what makes you different from your other fellow candidates, and what are the issues that separate you the most from this field?
Well, I've been on the board for 17 years. I have not been in a leadership position, and some of you may know that I've opposed a number of the things that the other board members have put forward and wanted to do. So you may think to some extent I've been beating my head against the wall for a while. But I'd urge you to take a look at a paper that I have prepared for this evening. It's out on the tables outside, this front and back, on the record, things that have gone not so well for me, things that I think have gone very well. Let me mention one I think went very well and that the board came to consensus on some time ago, and that's the use of growth measures for understanding whether we really are succeeding in the classroom. And those, I began to talk about that more than 10 years ago when there was only an understanding of the SOL standardized tests. But since then, we've developed growth percentiles, the dynamic test that Mr. Castillo talked about. The board's gotten behind those.
Ms. Gill.
Thank you.
There's a lot of talk about transparency. Please give us specific examples of how would you support transparency in the actions of the school board?
That is the buzzword of the campaign, I think, on the city and the school side this year. I'd like to see us communicating with our community in a better way. I'd like to see the real story the first time and not hear a couple different stories before we hear the real story. I think we have a tendency to go out with an answer before we've had time to really think about what that answer should be and give the best and most clear answer to our citizenry. We have a lot of information out there. I know people keep saying it's not out there, we're not being transparent, but the information is out there. I was wading through all the data today. It is there. Maybe we need to do a better job of communicating that data and putting it in a form that people understand. If people think we aren't being transparent, then we aren't being clear enough with our communication.
Final round. Ms. Kuchma, What are your thoughts about a high school campus that includes commercial or residential development?
I'm very concerned about any mention of a residential development adding more housing units to our city. So that is just immediately a flag for me because our schools are already overcrowded. We have one that needs renovation, another one, Mount Daniel. They're at capacity, so when you talk about a campus that you're going to bring more residential units in, I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about having this, how this is going to work to have security for our students and have open space for our community, and then also have commercial space in this same land. I just feel I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of questions, and I think the process is already going too fast, and I would like to do it much more thoughtfully.
Mr. Kaye, what policies would you support to prepare students for career readiness outside of academics, such as the development of teamwork skills or showing up to work on time?
Those are probably the most important things in your real work life. You know, be able to work with others. It's important whether you're on the school board or city council or any volunteer group. I think we need to maybe involve our kids in more internships if the opportunities open themselves. Get them involved in a lot of community activities as much as possible. I know they have tremendous workloads. And then ask them what they want to do. You know, they already work in teams. They're on athletic teams together, they're on debate teams and academic teams. So I think they have the basic skills, perhaps once again drawing upon the wealth of our community here. We could, you know, have people come in and mentor them, coach them to talk about these same subjects. But once again, I always look to the kids. They're very, very smart, and they already have these social networks, and they know how to work together. They just probably need a little bit more refinement. Thank you.
Mr. Radcliffe, what policies would you support to grow our own teachers and school leaders as well as to retain them here in the city?
To grow our own teachers and leaders, I assume that means out of the student body. Do you think that's the thrust of the question? I'm not sure how to create an exact teacher, but creating a love for community, having the kids have a great experience in the schools, and having satisfied, happy teachers who work as and look like mentors to our kids. I see a lot of discontent, unfortunately, from our teachers. I hear a lot of reports of people feeling put upon by policies that are coming from the top. I think that we need to take a much more empathetic look at what the teachers are feeling and how we need to change things to turn this back into a place where people really want to come and work. I mean, we're still working to try to build salary parity with neighboring jurisdictions, and people are complaining that things are being crammed down upon them. Well, then that's not the best thing for our schools. So to create new leaders, I think I would make the ones we have, our teachers who are so valuable, a lot happier.
Mr. Reitinger, what would you do to expand after-school care, and what are your views on the sliding scale fee?
I have to say that I am less experienced about this question than I ought to be because my wife and I haven't used after-school care. I do think after-school care ought to be available to everyone, and certainly it's more and more critical in the environment we have today that we give kids a safe environment to stay in when both parents are working. So I regret I don't have a really good answer for that, but I'd rather tell you nothing than make up stuff.
Mr. Castillo, the city schools have a record number of students. What specific proposals do you plan to introduce that will help the school system deal with this continued expansion?
Well, I think a little perspective historically is in order here. And the first is, you know, what is normal in Falls Church? And in 1965, enrollment in the school system was 2,400 kids. And so what is normal? Is 2,400 back in 1965? Imagine 2% growth to date, if we had stayed at 2,400, we'd have, I'm not going to do the math, but, or is normal 1,000 in 1984, when the viability of the school system was in question because we didn't have enough students. I think what you've seen is a lot of people moved to the outer suburbs in the 60s and 70s, and they're coming back now because the center of the area is where people want to be. So I think if you put that historical perspective into place here, we've done this before and we can do it again. And I think what we have to do is follow through with our plan of growth to expand and modernize our facilities. Thanks.
Dr. Smerdon. What is your position on the use of technology in the schools? Are we using too little, too much? And what's your reasoning?
A great question, and I know there are folks that sort of differ on this in terms of opinion. I'll just give you the example of one of my children who reads 2 grade levels behind and has found the entire world open up to her via technology. She watches NASA videos, she wants to be a scientist, she loves archaeology, and that would not have happened without technology. It has been critical to her to become a learner and to love learning. And through that, she's actually discovered books. It turned out the other way around, and technology helped her learn to read. I'm a strong proponent of technology as a tool, and only as a tool, and not in replacement for good instruction. Thank you.
Mr. Sharp, what civic groups or organizations are you a member of?
Well, I've recently become a member of the Lions Club, one of the longest-serving clubs in Falls Church City. But in earlier times, I've started a program called Homestretch here in the area, which serves homeless families, now serves roughly 65 families every year, and has a tremendous track record of 95% success in getting those families back into the regular market and staying self-sufficient. I also, for all the years that I've been on the school board, I've been the representative from the schools and the city to something called the Partnership for Youth in Fairfax. And that has done a variety of things, including mentoring, which some have talked about tonight. We have 2 mentoring programs in Falls Church City because of the technical assistance that program provided to the city.
Ms. Gill, do you support the separation of school administration and city administration, or do you think that the 2 entities could share common services, technology, and resources to save money?
I think that if we can share resources to save money, then we should. I don't think that we should do that at the expense of our school system just because we can. I think that we should only do it if it makes the best sense for both bodies. I don't believe in redundancies unless they really are necessary. I haven't researched the issue in great detail to point out specific instances where we have redundancies, but I think that if we can cost share, that would be great. We are a small city. We have limited resources both on the school and the city side, and if we can share and work together, that would be wonderful.
That completes the question bank. Now we'll turn to your closing statements. Ms. Kuchma, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
I've been a parent in this school system for 13 years, and I think what I bring to the table that is maybe different from people sitting here is I've been a parent of students with learning disabilities, and I've had to work basically full-time as their case manager and educating staff about their needs. And on this journey, I've formed relationships with educators in all the buildings. And they've been talking to me about what they want for our school district. And I would like to try to use my knowledge of what they would like for our school district to make things better here. I'm very concerned about the budget transparency. Went to the work sessions, and the fact that we voted on upwards of $46 million on a handout, that's really, really discouraging to me. There's not enough transparency in that process. The board recently changed the budget policy and took out the language that would make it require the superintendent to put together a complete financial plan for our school district. I would restore this policy. That's very disconcerting. I did put together a survey and I circulated it with another member of the community because I think that getting feedback from the community is really important. I'm very concerned about the kids in the middle. Again, George Mason High School is an awesome place, but we need to have some slides at the school board meetings about the other 80%. There's a lot of potential here, and I really think we ought to lean on our educators and what they have to say. Currently in the community, the educators aren't feeling heard or valued, and that is part of the reason for their departures. It's not always about money. It's about listening, and I will
Mr.
listen.
Kay.
First of all, I just want to say this has been a great experience campaigning. You meet so many people and learn so many things just by being out there. For me, running is because I really love the city and I love the schools. My son was 2 through graduation. He had a great experience. He always tells me he enjoyed it. He had a great high school experience. I want to make sure we have that for future kids. And the reason I'm running, because I'm concerned about the future of the schools and the city. We have a lot of challenges that we've gone over. Our construction, the growth in the schools, our budgets, and what our kids need, and especially in terms of education. I want to make sure that we continue to build upon what we have. It won't happen just by itself, by wishful thinking. It's not going to happen. I'm concerned about, as I mentioned, about the SOLs at TJ and Mary Ellen's and Henderson compared to some of our peer schools. I'm worried about Mason's rankings versus other local high schools. They've been slipping. I'm worried about, we're focusing on the top layer of the kids that are very successful and going to prestige universities, but we have a whole middle that I hear over and over from parents that we're not addressing. I want to make sure that the teachers have the resources so they can help the kids. I don't want to see bureaucracy building. That's easy to do. If we can combine city and schools back office services, absolutely. We must do it so we can funnel resources. Looking forward to some of the big challenges, and once again, it comes down to our city and development of this campus. We need to get back to the basics and think what we really need. Do we want to have Falls Church as we know it with growth? We absolutely need development. We need commercial development. But do we want to have it a basically large apartment building? I would say no. I want to look at the facts and data, not throw out facts and figures that have no relevancy. Don't make bland assertions about all examine all options. No, you hear me, what I've said and where I stand, and I believe that it's best for the city.
Mr.
I hope you feel the same way.
Thank you for having me tonight. This is a very important election in terms of who you choose to lead you through this George Mason High School build-out. We have an infrastructure problem in our schools, and if that is mended by patchwork and things like that, it's eventually going to impact class size and even the quality of our education. So among these candidates up here, I would ask you to look very, very carefully at the kind of leadership that you're going to get from each one of these people. I need to clarify one thing. I only went to one Falls Church Ed Foundation event. I didn't go to the one last year. I'm sorry. I also wanted to go back to the college counseling thing because I don't know if I was clear about what I want to do. My idea, subject to vetting it with people who are actually education policy advisors, is to take a more empathetic approach to what students go through in the early grades. I think our kids are stressed out because our programs are pretty challenging. And I think that it doesn't need to be such a difficult process. There's been some discussion about data. I'd like to point out a program that I think is excellent called Response to Intervention that we've been rolling out in beta here in the district. RTI uses kids' test scores to identify kids who are falling behind grade level and then has several tiers of increasing levels of support the farther behind they are. So it's a great example of how, and the goal is to get them back up to grade level where they're in the green zone and they don't need any additional help. I've seen this program work for children I know, and it's a great example of how we should be using data to then provide personal attention to the child. I have to say that there is a video on the school board facilities section of the website that describes what information is confidential. It's private information from developers. And I'd like to thank you for considering me as your candidate. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Reitner.
Thank you all for coming. I'd like you all to either vote for me or not vote for me based on who I am and what I believe. So we've had some opportunity to learn that tonight, but I would request that any of you who are interested in learning more go to my website, which is www.reitinger.org. It is REITINGER. It's like right here. It's very detailed. It's got a lot of issues, and so you can drill down and you can decide, am I the person you want to vote for or not? I will tell you, I think I've got a lot of good experience, and I've been involved in a lot of committees over time, both chairing them and participating on them. For example, right now, the New York Governor's Cybersecurity Advisory Board, where you don't have power. You're just one of many, and you have to build consensus and you have to drive in the right direction. So that's what I'd like to do on the school board. I'll briefly tell you the issues, since I didn't do this in my opening statement, that I've been most concerned about are right-sizing the use of technology, because I think, like Becky, that it's very critical, but I think we've gotten a little bit too much in love with technology. Teacher retention, I agree that it's not all about the money, as Mark was saying, and we actually need to track and understand the reasons teachers don't accept or leave so that we can address the real problems as opposed to just the perceived problems. Transparency, I've talked a lot about that. I won't go into it now, other than to say I have written some suggestions to the school board on one way to, I think, make the closed meeting issue even smaller by trying to make it a little bit more certain, to make it easier for people to participate. And planning for the future. Regardless of whether you like mixed-use development or like the PPEA process or not, and there's a lot of good arguments about that. We've got to build a new high school, and we've got to expand Mount Daniel, because our current facilities aren't good enough. So, regardless of all the argument around the edges, let's recognize that we have to have more space, because great teachers are the most important part, but great teachers don't do you any good if there's not a building for them to sit in to teach. With that, I will close to say, I started running because I thought...
Castillo.
I would yield to my distinguished colleague, but I've got a lot to say here, too. If you'd like, follow my page on Facebook, Castillo for Falls Church. I've been posting a lot of things that respond to what I've been hearing from the community. I'd like to thank the sponsors, and I'd like to start out by saying, the mission of the school board under the Constitution of Virginia is to provide free, high-quality education to K through 12 students, and that's what we do. And we do three things. We hire a superintendent, we have one employee, we set policy, and we do a budget. And one of the things you have to understand is we have to let our people do their jobs. Their jobs are difficult. I taught for 3 years as an adjunct professor at Georgetown, and it was brutal. It was awful. And I was humbled beyond words. So, having been through this, I have immense respect for everybody in the system. There are big questions in this election. And it could be, if you look at the history of Falls Church, it is not an unbroken line of progress. We've had ups and downs. We've had, at one point, 6 members of school board resigned en masse in the 50s because of debates or worse with city council. Exceptionalism in Falls Church doesn't insulate us from moving backwards. And one of the things as we talk about growth, explosive growth, no, if you look back since 1984, we've had 2-ish, 3-ish% growth annually. And remember, at 2,400 students in the mid-60s, we're sort of getting back to normal. Our spending has been steady as a fraction of the total city budget at about 45 to 47% for over 10 years. We spend 10% less per student than Arlington. Our administrative overhead at 2.7% is the lowest of any similarly sized district. So I guess the bottom line, if you like what we're doing, the buck stops here, vote for me. If you don't, well, you know what to do. Thanks.
Dr. Smyrna.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'll start out by telling you what I'm not. I'm not a construction expert by any stretch of the imagination, though it appears that we have a lot of folks on the current school board who spend a lot of time focused on construction. My contribution to discussions about construction would be what is the educational vision and value of the construction that we're proposing. More than space for bodies, but what is it that we want teaching and learning to look like in these spaces that we're talking about building. That's what matters to me. I decided to run for school board because I really do have grave concerns about substantial achievement gaps here in our city, and that's what I care about. I believe we can do more with less. I believe that we do need to create ambitious and achievable board goal members, and in fact, one of the duties, the fourth duty, I apologize for correcting you, is developing a strategic plan. That is a duty of the school board. So I believe we need a strategic plan that has measurable goals, which we track, that we share, and we hold all of us accountable for meeting. And I believe that those goals should also include reducing gaps where they exist. Thank you.
Mr. Sharp.
Regardless of whether you permit me to continue with serving you on the school board, as I have for 17 years, I think I'm very encouraged about the future of our school system and our city. And I see a leader in every chair up here. I see a leader in every chair out there. I indeed see a leader in every portion of our electorate. And I think that's the kind of community that we have. So as I say, I'm very encouraged. I do think that there are things that we've done as a city that show that we can be a pioneer in education. You've heard of some of the firsts that I rattled off earlier tonight, including integrating the schools, providing for an IB program, including an IB program that goes K through 12. Well, I think that we need to continue in that pioneering spirit and work on becoming a genuine world-class education. I think that there are things that we need to do to complete it, including going beyond this agrarian calendar that we've been using to something more like a year-round calendar, and going beyond the rigid boxes and things that we're used to in our facilities, which are really a part of our industrial past and not really suitable for our world-class education of the future. I know some have apprehension about year-round, and I want to emphasize that if we did go to a year-round, it would mean less stress on our students, not more. We have currently a calendar that packs almost everything that we try to do into a very small window of time. It's almost as if our students are running a marathon and giving many other students who also do IB and AP programs a long head start and then have to try to catch them because we don't start our programs early enough and take enough time to do them. Thank you.
Ms. Gill.
One quick note on the busing question. I want to say that I think we do an amazing job with what we have. They are super efficient, and I didn't want to make that as a slam on our school system. We do a great job with the busing, even if it is early. So on November 3rd, you have a big choice to make. The school board is a team of 7. And on November 3rd, I urge you to consider which 3 individuals you want to elect to the school board and which 3 people will be the best addition to that team. Most of us up here agree on the need for more transparency, better communication, excellent schools, and the need for strong oversight of our construction projects. Where we differ is on our approach to solving these issues. I am a collaborative, innovative team player who's focused on finding solutions, not just identifying problems. I'm an attorney with experience in contracts, negotiation, and sophisticated financial instruments. I know how to get high-stakes work done in an efficient and cost-effective manner. In our city, when I saw a need for more engagement and communication between parents, I founded Falls Church City Parents. I get things done. My motto in all things is to seek to understand and then to be understood. I've reached out to a wide variety of community members over the past 5 months, people who support me and people who hold very different views than I do. If elected, I will continue to do that. It is not enough to say you're listening to people. You have to actually sit down and listen to them. We have an amazing school system, one that we should all be proud of, but that doesn't mean we can't do better. We can always do better. And the day we stop trying is the day I will start worrying about our schools. And I don't believe that is a day that will ever come in Falls Church City. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not an expert on every issue that will come my way as a school board member. None of us are. What I am is a caring, concerned citizen who saw a need for change and felt I could help be an agent of that change. I hope you will consider casting your vote for me on November 3rd.
Thank you, candidates. Audience, please join me in a round of applause. Please also join me in a round of applause for the families of our candidates. As you know, running for school board is a family decision. And for all these fine folks to be up here this evening, someone else is helping at home, and we are grateful for their team approach to support the schools here in the City of Falls Church. I also want to congratulate the League of Women Voters, PTA, and VPAS for hosting this forum. You've done an exceptional job, so you deserve a round of applause. For our live audience here, if you filled out cards, there are students that will be happy to collect those at the back of the room. These candidates are eager to answer those questions and will do so in short order. And most importantly, I want to remind all voters that voting is both a right as well as a civic responsibility. So please exercise your right to vote and get out and go to the polls on November 3rd. Good evening, good night, and good luck to all.
And thank you to Ms. Wadiska. Job well done.